Have you ever wondered why Russia suddenly cares so much about the Philippines right now? The Philippines might look small on the world map compared to giants like China, Russia, or the United States. But in global strategy, this archipelago of more than 7,000 islands is a game changer. So, why exactly is Moscow keeping such a close eye on Manila? And why could decisions made in the Philippines affect Russia's own security thousands of miles away? When Ferdinand Marcos Jr. took office in 2022, the tone of the Philippine foreign policy shifted again. Unlike Duterte, who openly courted Russia and China, Marcos Jr. has leaned more toward rebuilding strong ties with the United States. For example, he allowed the expansion of the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, or EDCA, giving U.S. forces access to 4 additional bases in the Philippines, some of them strategically close to Taiwan. This move clearly signaled a pivot back toward Washington, especially in light of rising tensions in the South China Sea. That doesn't mean Russia disappeared from the picture, but the dynamics became more complicated. The outbreak of the Russia Ukraine war in February 2022 placed the Philippines in a difficult position. Under Marcos Jr., the Philippines joined most of the world in condemning Russia's invasion during the United Nations votes. This was a dramatic contrast to Duterte's era, when Manila often avoided criticizing Russia and instead highlighted the potential for cooperation. Still, it's important to note that not everything was scraped. Some of them agreements signed under Duterte, like energy and cultural exchanges, remain part of the Philippine-Russia framework, although many of the defense deals never fully materialized. For example, the Philippines had negotiated with Russia to purchase Mi-17 helicopters, but in 2022, the Marcos administration canceled the deal, citing concerns about potential U.S. sanctions under the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. This was a concrete example of how Washington's influence still shapes Manila's choices, even when it comes to exploring ties with Russia. In other words, the post-Duterte era did not erase Russia-Philippine relations, but it did redefine them. While Duterte used his presidency to symbolically challenge U.S. dominance and invite Russia into the Philippine orbit, Marcos Jr. has been far more cautious, seeking to balance opportunities for economic foreign with Russia while avoiding moves that could jeopardize the country's security alliance with America. For Russia, the Philippines is not just another country in Southeast Asia, it's a strategically located archipelago sitting at the crossroads of the South China Sea and the Pacific. Losing momentum with Manila means losing a potential partner right on the doorstep of some of the world's busiest shipping lanes. During Duterte's time, Russia saw an opening. Naval visits were arranged, including the historic docking of Russian warships in Manila Bay in 2017, something that had not been seen in the Cold War. These symbolic gestures were meant to signal that Russia could play a role in Asia's security landscape. But under Marcos Jr., such exchanges have become rare, if not non-existent. Economically, the cooling of ties has also hit Russian ambitions. During Duterte's presidency, Russia proposed energy cooperation, including joint oil and gas explorations in the Philippine seas. Russian energy firms like Rosneft had been in discussion to expand in Asia as sanctions tightened elsewhere. With Marcos Jr. pivoting toward the West, those opportunities have largely evaporated. To make matters worse, the Philippines canceled the 227 million buy Mi-17 helicopters in 2022, a clear blow to Russia's defense industry, which has been seeking markets in Asia to offset losses in Europe due to the Ukraine war. When the Philippines joined United Nations resolutions condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it wasn't just a routine vote. It was a public statement that the Philippines, once an emerging friend, was now aligning itself with Russia's critics. For Russia, this was more than symbolic. It signaled that many hope of cultivating the Philippines as a neutral or friendly actor in Southeast Asia had been lost, at least for the time being. The shift matters because it leaves Russia with fewer doors open in a region where the US and China are fiercely competing for influence. For example, in Vietnam, Russia still has an important defense and energy partnership. In Myanmar, Russia leaned heavily on the junta for arms deals, but the Philippines, once dangling as a possible strategic partner under Duterte, now feels much more further out of reach. And in geopolitics, losing even one potential ally in such a crucial location is no smaller matter. Here's where things get really serious. The US recently deployed its Typhoon missile system to the Philippines. This system can launch Tomahawk cruise missiles and SM-6 missiles with ranges that could threaten targets far into Asia. For Russia, this is not just about the Philippines hosting another US base, it's about the growing reach of American firepower in Asia. Imagine you're in Russia. US forces are already close to Russia's borders in Europe. Now Washington is expanding its missiles presence in Asia, near China, and potentially threatens Russia's Pacific territories. So the question becomes, could the Philippines now play a role in America's broader containment strategy, not just against China, but also against Russia? Of course, we can't talk about this without bringing China into the picture. China sees the Philippines as a battleground for influence. Beijing wants Manila closer, especially in the South China Sea disputes. But instead, Marcos allowed the US to expand access to Philippine bases. For Russia, this creates a dilemma. Russia doesn't want to lose potential partners in Asia, but it also doesn't want to anger Beijing, its closest ally today. Think about it. If the Philippines is aligning more with Washington, doesn't that directly threaten America's hand, not only against China, but also against Russia's own long-term interests in Asia? History shows that Russia is not quick to give up on countries once it sees potential. Even after the Cold War, when the Philippines was firmly inside America's orbit, Russia slowly tested the waters through cultural and educational exchanges. Russian language programs, academic partnerships, and naval goodwill visits were introduced as a way to establish soft power connections. In 2017 and 2019, for example, Russian naval ships docked in Manila Bay with joint training exercises and tours for Filipino officers. Clear attempts to build familiarity between the two militaries. These efforts suggest that Russia tends to play the long game, even when official relations cool down. Economically, there is precedent for persistence as well. When Western sanctions limited Russia's markets after 2014, Russia did not retreat. Instead, it actively sought new trade partners in Asia. In Southeast Asia, Vietnam became one of Russia's largest arms buyers, and in Thailand, Russia worked to promote agricultural exports despite competition from other powers. The Philippines may currently be leaning toward America, but from Russia's perspective, it remains an attractive emerging market. Its population of more than 110 million people offers potential for energy sales, wheat exports, and even technology cooperation. The larger question is whether Marcos Jr. leaves any space for this. On one hand, his strong embrace of the US and open criticism of Russia over Ukraine make it difficult to imagine any major defense or energy deals moving forward soon. On the other hand, Philippine foreign policy has historically shown flexibility depending on leadership. Under Gloria Arroyo, Manila deepened ties with China despite its alliance with the US. Under Duterte, Russia suddenly found itself courted after decades of distance. If history is any guide, Russia might simply wait for another political moment, a future Philippine administration more open to independent or balanced foreign policies. For now, though the window is narrowed, Russia understands that Marcos Jr.'s decisions, such as canceling the Mi-17 helicopter deal, backing UN resolutions against Russia, and expanding US bases access, are clear signs that Manila is firmly back in America's embrace. The real challenge for Russia is whether it can sustain even a modest level of engagement under Philippine politics, eventually till Philippine politics eventually shift. Again, history shows us that the Philippines is never just a local player. Its location in the Pacific makes it a central piece in global power struggles. During the Cold War, it was about US Soviet competition. Today, it's about China US competition, with Russia watching closely from the sidelines. The Philippines may not be thinking much about Russia right now, but in Russia's eyes, this archipelago has suddenly become a critical piece of the global chessboard. So let me leave you with this final question. If the Philippines continues to align with Washington and host US missile systems, how long before Russia decides it has no choice but to respond directly or indirectly in Asia?